Hello, welcome everyone. Thank you for joining. My name is Laura. I'm the Youth Engagement Facilitator at Raise Foundation, and I'm joined today by three of our wonderful YAC members, our Youth Advisory Council, Dillon, Charley, and Rebecca. Thanks for joining me today. So our YAC, if you don't know, are a collection of young people across Australia aged between 18 to 25 years old. And they're an important initiative at Raise so that we can, through ongoing consultation, get the voice of young people shaping and influencing our decision making at Raise. And we want everything that we're doing at our organisation to reflect the needs of our young communities. So that's the YAC's role. And today we've come together to do an online panel discussion for our Thank You Summit event. So I'm going to throw to these three in a second. But before I do that, I just want to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land that I'm calling from, which is here in Melbourne, the Wurundjeri Woi-wurrung people. And I just want to extend my deepest gratitude to them for caring for these lands and waterways for over 65,000 years. So I might now get these three to introduce themselves, say hello, tell us where you are in Australia, and what you're up to at the moment, apart from being on the YAC. So Rebecca, do you want to introduce and say hi?
Hi, I'm Rebecca. You guys can call me Beck. And I'm currently in Brisbane. I studied law and psychology, so I'm currently a law graduate at a firm. And outside of the YAC, I also do a little bit of advocacy work with the Family and Child Commission. And hobby-wise, I really love dancing. That's me.
Busy Beck. Thanks, Beck. How about you, Dillon? Can you tell us a bit about yourself and where you are calling from?
Yeah, my name's Dillon Harris. I'm calling from Sydney. I'm currently studying my undergraduate degree of primary teaching and psychology. Um, Outside of studies, I like to paint, and love to stay active. I'm also loving working with Rays and hope that continues.
Cool. Thanks, Dillon. I love that everyone's sharing their hobbies too. That's great. How about you, Charley?
Yes, so I'm calling in from the Nuttall lands in Canberra. At the moment, we're all in exam season, so just sort of studying very hard. I'm currently studying undergraduate degree in PPE and public policy. And I've part of a few organisations that really sort of try to get young voices in that space and try to ensure that the government decisions that are being made incorporate young voices. And aside from that, hobby-wise, I absolutely love sort of being active. I'm a huge football fan, and so often get up at very, very bad hours in the morning to watch football, and absolutely love playing it as well.
Oh, what an amazing group we have here. Thanks for being here today. So we're going to kick off just with a group chat, something that we identify in our data. So we collect before and after program data from almost 3,000 mentees across the country. And we ask them what issues are important to them. And consistently over the last few years, mental health has been the statistically highest issue that young people care about. So I want to hear from you three. Why do you think that is? Why are they identifying it as an issue that they care about? Like, why is that important? Like, why does that matter to us? And what do you think is impacting young people's mental health at the moment? And we're thinking obviously about your own experience, but also remembering our mentees are in that kind of 13 to 15 age group as well. Does anyone have any thoughts about that?
I'll start us off. My first thought around mental health currently is just the disconnect between perception and what we see online. And I think everything surrounding mental health is to do with perception, and kids, especially nowadays, are being told that their perceptions are wrong and that they should feel great because they're living in Australia, a great country that's super secure. But really they only have their small lens of what is going on. And I think that's being like rejected a lot, especially like looking on Instagram and, you know, seeing what's going on in the world. It's like hard to actually take your own problem seriously.
Yeah, such a good point, Dylan. And yeah, remembering this age group, social media is kind of the way they've been raised, and it's the way they're, you know, getting a lot of information and connection to peer groups, and their brains are still developing. So it does really alter the way they relate to themselves. Excellent point. Does anyone have anything to add on to that? Or just back to the general question, like, why do we think this group of mentees, we're talking thousands across Australia over the last 3 years, have really, you know, ticked that box, mental health matters most to me, of all the issues we're asking them about?
Well, I think there's sort of two main points. I think there have certainly been factors that have exacerbated the presence of mental health and particularly sort of mental illness within that young age group. We can look at things like COVID, like social media, as you mentioned, Dylan. But I think that another thing to look at, which I think is actually a very good thing, is there's been a much better improvement in terms of the sort of destigmatizing mental health and sort of encouraging students that, you know, it's okay to not be okay, and it's okay to not have a good day, and it's okay to sort of have these feelings. And sort of providing students support, you know, exactly what Raise does to kind of help them. And I think that's been a much better conversation. If I look back to sort of conversations I've had with my parents or my older siblings, those conversations weren't had back then. And so a lot of students had to either, you know, as Dylan said, not validate their own struggles or simply suffer in silence. And so I think that's actually a good thing. But in terms of sort of what we have seen and what I guess sort of explains that data is, you know, you're exactly right, Dylan. I think social media is a huge thing. And I think a lot of us live our lives through social media, which can be good. We get a lot of information very quickly, but it can obviously have a very negative impact. And so it'd be really interesting to see some more data about sort of the correlation between sort of high social media uses in sort of metropolitan areas and sort of how that differs to other sort of maybe like regional areas or something like that, and how that then affects mental health.
Fascinating. Yeah, so I like that you're extrapolating kind of the environmental factors that could be contributing, but also the fact that more young people are identifying mental health as something that matters, because we're talking about it's destigmatized and it's part of the conversation when you're growing up, perhaps less so than it was even 10 years ago. How about you, Beck? Anything you wanted to add?
I can definitely agree with that. I think, you know, like growing up for myself, like even at school, I found that there was a profound lack of support in that area. But also coming from like a culturally diverse background, a lot of myself and a lot of my friends found it very hard to have those conversations, and we still do, just because of our backgrounds and the people we're around who kind of, I guess, don't believe in it. But social media has been good in part because it means that we've been able to kind of connect with a wider range of people and be like, hey, we're not the only ones. Like, it's like Charley was saying, like, it is okay to not be okay, and to have that wealth of information at our fingertips to be able to get that support, I think has definitely had a massive impact on, I guess, our awareness of ourselves.
Yeah, so it's a nuanced issue, right? Because there's, you know, accessibility on social media and connection to support, whilst there's also barriers to, like Dylan was saying, a positive self-perception. So fascinating. Okay, I think that's a good segue into hearing some more personal stories from each of you. So threading in with our theme of the Thank You Summit event, where we're looking at confidence in young people and how connection and community are a massive part of increasing confidence in young people. So I'd love to hear from each of you an anecdote from your younger life about, I suppose, a transformational journey where you noticed an increase in your confidence that was significant, and maybe walk us through the before and after, and how connection and or community was part of that journey. So Beck, would you be okay to start us off?
Yeah, of course. So a transformational moment for me was my transition from high school into tertiary education. And basically, I came out of high school not really knowing what I wanted to do. And I was going into a university where I didn't really know anyone. I didn't really have any friends. I'd lost a lot of friends throughout high school. Like, just that transition period is just difficult. And I was like, no, university is going to be a whole new chapter for me. It's going to be a whole new back. So what did I do? I signed up for every single possible extracurricular workshop or thing that they were running during like the orientation week, so like their welcome week. And I made a point to like meet like a new person at every single event. And I ended up talking to to a couple of different people who were at university for a few years before me, and so they were kind of experienced. They've been around the block, and they kind of took me under their wing and introduced me to like all these other events and groups, and it just kind of snowballed from there. And by the end of that week, I had like 50 new friends that I was having lunch with. Like, we were sitting in this massive group. It was great. And following on from that point, those connections that I had with those people, they kept coming up throughout my university journey. And people recognized me from that first week, years on from that point. So like 5, 6, 7 years later, they recognized me from that point. And if it wasn't for those connections that I had made in that first week of university, I wouldn't be where I am today, because from that point onwards, I started getting involved in more activities. I won awards from that. I won scholarships from that. And I got jobs from that. And it kind of just changed the entire trajectory of my life because of a decision that I made to put myself out there for 1 week.
What amazing that you were able to do that. That's awesome. I thought
yeah.
And Charley nodding along when you're talking about the difficulty of that transition from high school to tertiary. You both relate.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. Thanks, Beck. Great. I mean, very impressive to see that the community's there, but it was kind of you that took the initiative to make that connection. Cool. How about you, Charley? You got a story to share with us?
Yeah, so mine sort of goes back a little bit earlier. So this was at the start of high school. And I'd sort of finished primary school. I kind of had a lot of hobbies that I was really passionate about, and I was sort of, feeling really good. And then it was sort of towards the end of year 7, and I started to kind of lose that sense of belonging that a lot of kids have. I started kind of like drift between friend groups and started to kind of like lose a bit of my spot, if that makes sense. And then at the same time, I started to also kind of like stop playing a lot of my sports and stop doing a lot of those things I was really passionate about at primary school. And so I found myself in quite a kind of isolated state. And it was, it was very, very hard, because the things that I used to absolutely love and really enjoy doing, I didn't enjoy doing anymore. And so it was really hard to kind of find those times of sort of joy away from school, because obviously I wasn't working at that age. It was basically just sort of going back and forth between school and home. And because I didn't have that kind of sense of belonging, it was really sort of quite hard. And I think the biggest thing was, which is why I'm so impressed to see a kind of destigmatization around mental health, is because I felt incredibly scared to kind of open up about what I was feeling, because I thought, everyone goes through these kind of things. Everyone's experiencing this. You've just kind of got to get it through by yourself. And it wasn't until, so towards the end of year 8, start of year 9, where I kind of realized, I've got a lot of people around me who are there for me, who, will support me. And if I go to them saying, I'm not okay, like I'm struggling, they are going to sit there and they are going to listen. And so I started to kind of lean on the community around me. And that was incredibly supportive. And it kind of helped me get back onto my feet. And from like an academic and a kind of social standpoint, that's, as Beck said, that's kind of where the trajectory really sort of changed. I was sort of on a trajectory of continually not doing well in school, and continually hanging out with people who I probably shouldn't have been hanging out with, to then sort of really focusing in on school, looking towards tertiary education. And yeah, it's meant that I've been able to kind of really find what I'm interested in, find those passions again. And, you know, now coming to the end of my first year of university, where I've had to move to a new city and start all these fresh new things. And, you know, something that's very easy for me to kind of lose that sense of belonging. I know that because I've already gone through it, and I know that, you know, there are people around me to lean on, there is that community who is going to support you. And that's kind of what I try to encourage everyone around me who says, oh, you know, I'm feeling lonely, I'm feeling isolated. I feel like there's no one there to listen. And I always say, I guarantee there is. Sometimes you've just got to be the one to step out and ask for help, because that's something that I never did. I never asked for help. And that was sort of, you know, I was the architect of my own downfall in that sense, because I didn't rely on that community. And that's what I really encourage people to do.
Thanks for sharing that, Charlie. It makes me think a lot about our mentee age group, and a lot of the things you mentioned are the criteria that we target, right? Like losing that sense of belonging, not knowing how to ask for help, etc. Just one other question. Do you know what the significant change was? Like that kind of woke you up to realizing you had this community you could turn to? Was there someone that approached you, or was it just kind of like suddenly you realized?
Yeah, so I mean, I'd sort of been feeling it for a few months, and a lot of my friends, you know, being quite young and so I didn't really have the kind of knowledge to sort of pick up on it and say, hey mate, are you okay, blah, blah, blah. But I remember it was in a history class, and I must have been very quiet that lesson. I must have been very switched off. And my teacher asked me to stay back. And of course, you know, being a young high school kid, my brain immediately went to, oh, I've done something wrong, I'm in trouble. You know, I've been caught playing games on my computer, or, you know, something along those lines. And so I kind of went into a bit of a fight or flight response, but it was just a genuine, and this is what kind of caught me off guard. My teacher was genuinely like, you know, like, are you okay? Like, you know, just wanted to check in. And originally I was like, yeah, like I'm fine, you know, brushed it off. But then he was kind of like, he kept asking. He was like, are you sure? Like you seemed, you know, here's X, Y, Z, why I'm a little bit concerned. And I brushed it off like, yeah, no, I'm fine. I'm just tired. Didn't get good sleep last night. Continued to brush it off. And then a couple of days later, I went into his office and I just said, I'm not okay. And that was the first time I'd kind of like admitted out loud, I'm not okay, which is, you know, it's an incredibly kind of like important step that a lot of people struggle to take, you know, for the first time. And from that point, you know, he just said, yeah, I know, like it's, you know, I've seen this for the past couple of months. You know, here's what we're going to do. And it was just a very, very simple, you know, my office is always going to be open. Here's XYZ contact if you want to talk to them. And it was simply just that support that, you know, and that kind of knowledge that there was someone in my corner who was willing to kind of help me out. And, you know, I didn't necessarily use all of those kind of, you know, contacts or kind of support mechanisms that he gave me, but simply knowing that there was someone there was really, really powerful. And, you know, as I sort of started to get better and started to feel a lot more confident, I continue to kind of go back to him and check in. And then he was sort of really supportive in my transition to move into state as well. And it was just amazing to have that person kind of in my ring. And I think, you know, that was one of his passions. He now works at a special education school, and it's, you know, that's what he does. That's who he is. But just to have that experience was really transformative.
Wow. Yeah. It makes me think about, you know, so many mentees tell us that their mentor is the first person that's done that for them. Like you're talking about with your teacher, the first person to show up for them and be like, I'm here, you know, how can I support you? So an amazing story to highlight the importance of just that one role model. Thanks, Charlie. Dillon.
Yes. So I had two stories in mind, but since Beck and Charlie did school ones, I think I'm going to go for a different one. My family bought a cafe a few years ago out in like a rural town, and it was pretty much like just us at the start. And you know, there were many a morning where I was the lone warrior making coffees for probably 30 to 40 very stubborn 60 to 80-year-old folks. And I just thought of this story because, you know, at the start it was pretty difficult to hold them off, because we'd taken over the space and taken out a restaurant, and they were all kind of like, when's the restaurant coming back? What's happening? Like, and, you know, I had no idea what to do. I was just like, I'm just here to make coffee. But, you know, we were kind of on the front lines, taking the crap from everyone for a while. But I just remember, you know, at a certain point where, you know, I got a little better at making coffee, or like I knew what was going on a bit more, like the confidence kind of switched for me. And at that point, like the respect of the community became more apparent. And it just made me think that it's not necessarily like the same for kids, but I think the principle stands that, you know, if you let yourself be adapted by the environment rather than fighting against it and, you know, just beating yourself up about not being good enough or not being like the right fit, like, and just kind of taking that line of confidence, it can often just happen and work out for the best. And yeah, I just felt my confidence in general life grow since then as well. So yeah.
And so do you think it was something about the kind of building of resilience, because you're in a tricky spot, right, with not having many relationships and sort of like getting a lot of flack from everyone, being new in town and whatnot? Do you think it was something about being challenged in that way that increased your confidence?
Oh, 100%. And that's a great point. It's like, you know, resilience will take you anywhere. And I told that to my mentor over and over, and my mentee over and over this semester, because, you know, I'm not going to be there for him forever. And him like really being able to work out challenges for himself is like, that's everything. So yeah, I think that does for sure tie into it. And my resilience was definitely tested, and yeah, it was good since then.
Great. Thanks, Dillon. Really good to think about that perspective as well, like preparing young people to be able to navigate challenges in their lives, because they're inevitable. It's tough out there. Cool. I wish I could speak to you guys all afternoon. So interesting to hear your stories, but we will have to wrap up soon. I'm just going to throw this one out at you without any prep, but I wonder if you could all say something to our audience. I'm assuming a lot of them are going to be our amazing volunteer mentors, or perhaps some potential mentors who aren't sure if they want to sign up yet. So if you had a message you wanted to say to them in terms of volunteering in our program and the impact that could have on a young person's life. Dillon, I know that you are a mentor, so maybe you want to kick us off.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, God, I'm obviously studying psychology and teaching, but like the impact that you can have is just the most rewarding thing that I've ever experienced. You know, going in every week for such a little amount of time and seeing that progression is it just sustains you. I have no better evidence that I am in the right field based on mentoring. So I encourage anyone who's thinking about going into the social sector, or just cares about people and wants to see people grow and supported, like it's such a great initiative, and Ray's run it so well. So yeah.
Thanks, Dillon. So well put. Charley or Beck, I know you haven't had personal experience, but is there anything you want to share just on behalf of you know, doing advocacy yourself and volunteering for Rays in a different capacity?
I've been mentored and I've been a mentor, and I think I can safely say that it does, like, you get just as much out of it as you do put into it. And it has the potential to absolutely change someone's life. And it did mine.
Yeah.
And I think that if you can just do, like, if you can just change one life in your time here on Earth, I think that makes it all worth it. But yeah, I think it's just so much fun, and you just learn so much about the other person, and you just share experiences, and that's just how we learn, from experiences.
Definitely. Charley, can you top those two amazing
They're two pretty impressive answers. I'm not sure I could top it, but yeah, before I found out about the Ray sort of mentor program, as Beck said, I've been mentored by that history teacher and other people, and I've also been a mentor for younger students as well. And the biggest thing that I can say is it can be so incredibly, it might not mean a great deal to you, but it can mean so incredibly much to that mentee. And from my experiences as being a mentor, I have learned so much more about myself from learning about others and trying to help others. Because oftentimes you go to someone and they come to you with and say, hey, I'm struggling in this, this, and this. And you kind of think, oh, well, that's a similar struggle that I'm having. And so you kind of think to yourself, how can we kind of get through this? And you do learn a great deal about yourself as well. And I think that's kind of the biggest thing that it's been like for me, is because it's constantly it's a give and take relationship. It's constantly you're supporting the other person, and by you supporting them, they're in turn supporting you. And it's an incredibly beneficial relationship that I really, really encourage anyone to kind of take up, because there are very, very little very, very little negatives and a whole heap of positives, and it would be a fantastic experience both for you and for your mentee.
What a good note to end on. Thanks, Charley. And so lovely to chat with the three of you. And thank you for joining me for this online panel. And thanks to our audience for watching. And I hope you got lots out of the discussion as well. And we'll see you all again soon. Thanks, everybody. Take it easy.